And when you consider
A reading from the Gospel according to Luke.
Lord, you,
On a Sabbath, Jesus went to dine in the home of one of the leading Pharisees, and the people there were observing him carefully. Parable to those who'd been invited, noticing how they were choosing places of honor at the table. When you're invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not recline at the table in a place of honor. A more distinguished guest than you may have been invited by him, and the host who invited both of you may approach you and say, "Give your place to this man." And then you would proceed with embarrassment to take the lowest place. Rather, when you're invited, go and take the lowest place, so that when the host comes to you, he may say, "My friend, move up to a higher position." Then you'll enjoy the esteem of your companions at the table, for everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. Then he said to the host who invited him, "When you hold a lunch or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or your wealthy neighbors, in case they may invite you back and you have repayment. Rather, when you hold a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. Blessed indeed will you become if because of their inability to repay you. For you will be repaid in the resurrection of the righteous. These are the words of our brother Jesus. Praise to you, Jesus Christ. Have a seat. Well, I imagine that many of us in our working worlds have been to something like this banquet, some sort of engagement with local politics, or we've been at gatherings where there are notable power players, the who's who within our companies or our governing bodies. Somebody asked me yesterday, somebody petitioning to be on the next ballot said, "Oh, have you met with the new mayor?" Yes, why I have. Perhaps the most interesting situation, though, that I've observed, and you may remember this, was when Bishop Tilcott first came to our diocese following the retirement of Bishop Jenke, who you know had been ill for quite a while. We were all curious to see what he would be like, and there was much jockeying for an opportunity to bend his ear on our perspectives regarding the diocese. Each pastor of every parish was given a set of tickets to hand out to chosen parishioners so that they could attend Mass and meet and greet the new bishop at St. Matthew's. And our tickets at St. Pat's went to the parish council, and I was fortunate that Bridget let me have her ticket, much to their chagrin. I showed up to Bridget. The church was packed, and Monsignor Deptula was in his element as the organist dazzled us with high church music. There was a finely robed procession with dozens of priests swinging incense censers and filling the air with that sweet aroma that we inhaled through our masks because it was at the height of COVID. There were nervous seminarians, acolytes all decked out, altar servers in their gender-specific vestments. It was St. Matthew's. They all fluttered at the feet of the priests and the newly appointed bishop, carrying out their responsibilities in assisting the upper echelons of the diocese, while every trustee and their families, decked in their Sunday best, smiled and nodded and laughed on cue at the bishop's jokes. And after Mass, it was announced that following the recessional, Bishop Tilcott would participate in a reception line for anyone wanting to introduce themselves. And there was a mad dash to the line, so we left out the side door. But I noticed in the audience 2 or 3 Latino families with young children, and women wearing their mantillas. And I hope that they were able to get through the line, but I sense the trustees might have beat them to it. I don't know. But this was the sort of event that Jesus was attending in our gospel reading that prompted his teaching. Meals played an important role in the society where Jesus lived. It was more than a time for sharing nourishment. It was a time for sharing ideas and to model different aspects of social relationships. And there was a set protocol for these events depending on the location and the company and their customs. Expectations were that those of high levels of influence would avoid keeping company with those of lower status, like known sinners, tax collectors, prostitutes. They would assume seats at the table according to rank and influence, and would obey rituals regarding food selection, preparation, and cleanliness. The narrator of our gospel says that Jesus was an invited guest, but not without an intent. This was the home of a prominent Pharisee, and Jesus was an up-and-coming social influencer, and they were keeping an eye on him. I can almost see the look of amusement on the face of Jesus as he scanned the room, noticing how they were choosing their places of honor at the table and observing the dynamics. It wasn't clear what prompted him to speak up. And it wouldn't be unusual at a gathering like this to engage in challenging conversations about social and religious topics, but the comments Jesus made were most provocative. Can you imagine if you'd just pulled out your chair and you were intending to sit in that seat of honor, to be close to the host of the dinner when Jesus proclaimed, when you're invited to a feast, don't recline at the table in a place of honor. More distinguished guests than you may have been invited by him, hint, hint. And the host who invited you both may approach you and say, give this place to this man. And then you would proceed with embarrassment to take the lowest place. Wow, talk about having egg on your face. Imagine if I had stood up in Mass with Bishop Tilka and said, when you're invited to host the new bishop for his first diocesan Mass, don't presume that means that you are expected to sit at his right or his left. Perhaps he would prefer to have this family from Guatemala who attends St. Mary's be assigned those places of honor. Monsignor Deptula would have turned beet red, the crowd would have murmured, and I would have been shown the door. This parable of Jesus seems on the surface like a lesson in social etiquette, but embedded in this message are two themes. Remain humble and be generous to those who cannot repay you, those who are unable to reciprocate. Reciprocity in relationships is what this event was designed for. Pharisees were hobnobbing with the movers and shakers of their community. If you serve on any board or hold positions of administrative responsibility, eventually you will be addressed by your title and placed at a seat with the stakeholders and donors and professionally elite. We expect that each person there comes with an idea of what they are willing to offer and what they want in terms of an outcome. Reciprocity is key to our cultural expectations in relationships, whether we're talking about international negotiations, business ventures, employment, or friendship. We expect something in return for our efforts. How embarrassed we would be, for instance, if someone presented us with a Christmas gift and we have nothing to offer in return. How hurt we can be when we are the ones reaching out and inviting someone to do things and they never initiate contact with us. We get the message. We might even feel ghosted by them. Our relationships are primed for mutual benefit. And in our culture, the idea of self-promotion, of trying to position yourself with those who can take you places, or simply to assert that we are as worthy as anyone else in the room, to sit at the head table or the front pew or the front of the bus, particularly if we are part of an oppressed class. It's a good thing to be self-affirming. When we are treated as second class, told to take our place behind others, made to feel that our voice doesn't count, our very being will never be good enough, then God calls us to affirm our worth, to hold our chins high and to not back down. Jesus would never have told Rosa Parks to sit at the back of the bus. He would have looked at her tired eyes and sat with her and affirmed her as a child of God. So when we read this parable, let's keep it within its context and intent, and then let us look at the broader implications. Jesus was calling into question a type of caste system, imagining instead hosts who choose to associate with those who are poor, crippled, lame, and blind, inviting them to their social network. The problem for hosts, however, as Jesus explicitly recognizes, is that in such a proposal, there is no honor forthcoming in return. Rather, it's an investment in the future, in the kind of society God wants for us. God of the orphans, widows, and aliens. Jesus' teaching is about the way we treat others, especially those among us unable to pay us back. We have our ways of distinguishing one from the other. To put it simply, we aren't where others who are different from us associate. We don't hang out there. Jesus' story is a reminder to us about the company we keep. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, if our goal is to create a beloved community, this will require a qualitative change in our souls, as well as a quantitative change in our lives. And I would add a letting go of our egos. Status feeds our egos, and associating with those who have privilege affirms that status which feeds our egos. So this is about letting go of our egos. And if we are secure in our identities as beloved children of God, then the ego is easier to relinquish. But more than that, Jesus knew that placing ourselves in the seats of those without power and prestige would give us a different vantage point. Think about it. Just ride in the back seat of your car. It feels different, doesn't it? It changes both your perspective on the ride and how you experience it. Imagine being a leading Pharisee at this event with Jesus and sitting in the servants' quarters, unable to rub elbows with other influential people, fed the scraps from the table rather than the fancy food prepared for the most respectable guests. Their experience wouldn't be the same. Consider this. If any of us went for a week with our cars locked in our garages, dependent solely on our feet for walking or the mass transit system, we would understand then what it's like for the poor to get to work, to purchase groceries or to go to the laundromat, or just to make all their appointments on time and to take care of their daily responsibilities. We might even begin to advocate for grocery stores in food deserts and safe bike lanes or faster bus routes if what existed was inconvenient for us. Or try and make a doctor's appointment with your preferred physician, and when they ask you about your insurance, tell them, well, I'm now on Medicaid, and see what happens. See if you are suddenly put on a wait list. You might reconsider the need for universal health care. But in order to know where to begin, in order to switch seats with someone who holds less privilege and status than we do, in order to step into their world for just a minute and to be changed by the empathy that grows from understanding the hardships that they face, we have to be in relationship with them. Our worlds need to merge, our paths need to cross. Otherwise, we'll continue to live in a bubble, blind to the conditions that others suffer with. A comfy, gold-lined bubble that makes our lives safe and enjoyable, but isolated from the harder realities that most people live. Jesus says we must invite to the wedding those who cannot repay us, those whose greatest gift to us is simply themselves. Their stories, their strength and sufferings, their gift to us is an invitation to evolve into people of compassion, people who step up to join Jesus in bringing about God's kingdom on earth. In 1961, journalist John Howard Griffin wrote a book on his experience of immersion in the Deep South as a black man. Do you remember it? Black like me. Griffin was from Mansfield, Texas, and he was born white, but he had his skin temporarily darkened to pass as a black man, and he traveled for 6 weeks through the racially segregated states of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, and Georgia to explore life from the other side of the color line. John Howard Griffin says that the experience broke something in him, saying if we could only put ourselves in the shoes of others to see how we would react, then we might become aware of the injustice of discrimination and the tragic inhumanity of every kind of prejudice. So Jesus wasn't just concerned with which fork we might use at the dining table or whether we place our napkins on our laps before digging in. He wasn't the Martha Stewart of mealtime manners, warning us that if we jump to the sea of honor too quickly, we might embarrass ourselves. Jesus looked around the room and said, "Hey, where are the people you pretend to serve? Where are those whom God makes a priority? Where are your widows and orphans and aliens, the poor and the marginalized? All this pomp and circumstance as if you're the most important one in the room. In God's kingdom, you will be humbled and asked to move out of the way for those God prioritizes. He calls us to turn the tables on systems that elevate some at the risk of alienating others. Are you up for that task? You are not alone, for God guides the humble in what is right and teaches them his ways." Amen.